The group of friends, Laura, Marcos, Andres, Sofia, and Raul, arrive at the abandoned town of Hollowmoor, known for the dark legends that surround it. This place, surrounded by a swamp covered by a constant fog, is reputed to be cursed due to strange rituals performed in the past. The friends, excited to film a video and prove that the rumors are not real, explore the deserted streets. However, they find the atmosphere of the place oppressive from the start. Despite their attempts to joke and downplay it, the heavy air and the strange silence of the town fill them with unease. The feeling of being watched begins to take hold of them as they advance towards the swamp. As night falls, the group arrives at the swamp following a worn map. The fog that covers the place is so thick that they can barely see a few meters ahead. All is silent, except for the occasional sound of something moving in the water. Sophia finds a wooden cross, partially buried in the mud, decorated with strange symbols. As she holds it, she feels a strange presence and an almost imperceptible whisper that seems to call her by name. The others hear nothing and laugh at her reaction, but Sophia insists that something is wrong. As they walk away, a dark figure seems to emerge for a moment in the distance, but disappears before they can clearly make it out. After the terrifying encounter in the swamp, they decide to spend the night in a nearby cabin they discover on the road. The building is in ruins, with broken windows and an atmosphere of utter abandonment. The wood creaks under their feet as they explore the place. Raul turns on his flashlight, and, as he shines his light on one of the windows, he sees for a second a silhouette that seems to be watching them from outside. When he checks again, no one is there, but the event leaves him uneasy. The group makes themselves comfortable to sleep, but none of them manage to rest well. The sounds from outside, such as branches breaking and a strange dragging on the ground, keep them in a constant state of alert. During the early hours of the morning, Laura, who has been unable to sleep, hears a strange noise outside the cabin. It sounds like something slowly dragging itself along the ground, getting closer and closer. She cautiously peeks out the window and sees fresh marks in the mud that weren't there before, as if something had been lurking around the cabin. Suddenly, a loud knock shakes the front door, making it move back. Waking the others, they check the door but find nothing but the marks on the ground, which seem to lead to the swamp. Although they try to rationalize it, fear begins to permeate the group, who now feel unsafe in the cabin. The next morning, they discover that Sophia is not in her bed. Her space looks untouched, as if she had never slept there. However, on the floor they find muddy footprints leading out of the cabin and towards the swamp. Alarmed, they begin to search for her around. They decide to split up. Laura and Marcos search near the water, while Raul and Andres search around the cabin. Sophia's absence increases the tension in the group, who begin to fear that the legends about the swamp may be real. The feeling of insecurity grows when they notice that the footprints seem to disappear in the fog, leaving them without clear clues. Laura and Marcos explore the surroundings of the swamp, following the footprints they believe belong to Sophia. They arrive at the place where she found the cross the day before and discover that it is now stuck in the ground as a marker. When Marcos touches it, he feels a cold hand grabbing him from the water. Laura helps him free himself, but the experience leaves them terrified. Looking into the water, they see something that looks like a face floating just below the surface, but it instantly disappears. With fear on their skin, they decide to return to the cabin to inform the others. Something in the swamp doesn't want them to leave, and they begin to feel like they are being watched. While Laura and Marcos are out, Raul and Andres, who are searching the cabin, begin to hear voices. These, at first faint, become increasingly clearer and repeat their names. The two follow the sound until they discover a hidden basement they hadn't noticed before. Thirty señores seal. They find señores near a journal, covered in mold with pages that seem soaked with water. Although it is difficult to read, they manage to understand a sentence that says, "The swamp always claims what is its own." The voices suddenly stop, leaving an overwhelming silence. The two feel that something is watching them from the darkness of the basement, but they can't see anything. When Laura and Marcos return to the cabin, they find Sophia sitting on the porch, her dress wet and her expression blank. When they ask her where she has been, she replies strangely, "We shouldn't have come here." Her voice sounds like an echo, as if several voices were speaking at the same time. When they try to approach her, Sophia abruptly stands up and heads into the cabin without saying anything else. Laura notices that her movements are stiff, almost unnatural, which increases the fear that something is not right with her. The group begins to suspect that Sophia is no longer the same. Inside the cabin, Sophia is acting strangely. She sits silently in a corner, staring into space. When Laura tries to talk to her, Sophia finally looks at her, but her eyes are glassy and dark, as if something has snuffed out her humanity. When they try to touch her, Sophia reacts violently, screaming in a deep voice that doesn't sound like her own. Her reaction causes the others to back away in fear. Laura insists that they need to help her, but Raul suggests that maybe Sophia isn't the same anymore and could be dangerous. The tension between them grows as they discuss what to do, until Sophia inexplicably falls silent again, as if nothing has happened. That night, Marcos disappears. Upon awakening, the others find his bed empty and a strange mark on the nearby wall. A figure of a circle with lines that seem to represent branches or roots, drawn in what appears to be mud. Laura begins to panic, convinced that the curse of the swamp is claiming each of them. Raul and Andres try to remain calm, but they are also scared. They search the surroundings of the cabin and shout Marcos' name, but the only response is the echo of their voices. Once again, the footprints on the ground seem to lead towards the swamp, where they vanish in the fog. Laura, Raul, and Andres begin to experience strange visions inside the cabin. Long shadows seem to move across the walls, though there is no one to cast them. The atmosphere becomes increasingly heavy, and the air is almost unbreathable. At one point, Andres clearly sees a figure standing at the end of the hallway, but as he gets closer, it disappears. Laura begins to hear her own name whispered by several voices at the same time, while Raul feels paralyzed by fear. The cabin seems to be alive, and the three begin to realize that they are not safe even inside it. Raul and Andres decide to return to the basement to read more of the journal they had found. Laura, though fearful, follows them. In the journal, they discover more details about the history of the town and the swamp. According to the pages, the people who live there performed sacrificial rituals to appease an ancient entity that lived deep within the swamp. However, one of the rituals went wrong, and the entity turned against them, trapping their souls and condemning them to eternal wandering. The swamp now seeks more victims to feed on. As they read, the voices return, louder this time, and something begins to move in the darkness of the basement. As they rush out of the basement, the three realize that the cabin is no longer the same. The walls seem to lengthen, and the windows show a distorted landscape. Suddenly, Sophia appears in the middle of the room with a sinister smile on her face and begins to walk slowly towards them. Her deep, distorted voice tells them that they should never have entered the swamp. Laura, Raul, and Andres run towards the exit, but the door is closed as if it were part of the wall. Desperate, they escape through a broken window and into the forest, with Sophia following them from a distance. In the woods, the group tries to decide what to do. Andres proposes finding a way to the village and leaving Sophia behind, but Laura refuses, arguing that there is still a chance to save her. As they argue, Raul notices that the fog has grown thicker and that they can no longer make out the path they came from. The feeling of being watched intensifies, and they hear footsteps approaching. Laura eventually convinces the others to try to perform a ritual to break the swamp's curse, following the instructions in the journal. However, they know that they will need to return to the swamp to do so, which increases their fear. The group returns to the swamp, where they find the place described in the journal, a stone altar covered in moss and roots. Laura begins to perform the ritual, reading the words from the journal aloud as Raul and Andres keep watch. However, Sophia appears again, this time accompanied by dark figures emerging from the swamp. The figures begin to surround them, and Laura struggles to finish the ritual as the voices of the shadows try to distract her. Just when it seems the ritual has worked, the ground begins to shake, and the entity from the swamp emerges. A monstrous, amorphous figure that devours everything in its path. The story ends with a scream from Laura that mixes with the sound of the shadows as the swamp claims them all.